Today, I wish to talk about a new anime that has more or less going to be concluded as of me recording this video, and that is Windbreakers Season 2. Yep, Windbreakers Season 2, a new anime to come out of the spring season of 2025 by Cloverworks Studios, and it's the follow-up to Windbreakers, which came out last year, believe it or not. And I want to talk about it because more or less the show is already setting itself up to like a really big, like what's to come moment of a inevitable season three, which I have no doubt is setting the stage up. And I want to get my thoughts and feelings all the way and actually form a review, not just the second season, but also to accept the first season. So without further ado, I'm going to transition into this one. So, as I've mentioned already, I'm going to talk briefly about season one and again season two. So, Windbreakers, what is the show all about? Well, if you haven't watched Windbreakers, the first season from last year of spring, it's pretty much about our main character, Sakura Haruka, who essentially is the protagonist of the show, who is outed as like the main outcast because of the fact of how he looked like, his lack of social skills, and during this time period, he goes through like a rough upbringing and actually becomes a proficient and excellent fighter as a result of him being the lone wolf as a result. And in this first season of Windbreakers, we see Sakura get to encounter new friends and more specifically a new school that he enrolls, which is Bofurin, which he is surprised by because of the fact that everyone in the school is actually treating him super kind, super nicely. Something that Sakura has never endured before, to the point where he has a hard time transitioning and getting used to that positive, uplifting feeling that he's not used to. And throughout this whole 13 episodes of the first season, we see Sakura go from like this character that was super social introverted but also trying to be tough to where we see him um, develop as a character through numerous fights where as it's always referenced throughout this first season and into the second season, every time these characters fight, there's always a story to be told within a fight, which is kind of similar to like other shows in the past, which I've kind of made references that I feel like Windbreakers in general is like what would happen if Tokyo Revengers, the show that came out not that long ago, was in an alternate setting. It wasn't like a gang related setting, but instead of like gangs fighting for each other for control, it's schools fighting for schools, but I guess in a different way. And also, I will commend that like the first season and even the second season, the animation, the vibes, the characters, the way they talk and interact with each other is super super reminiscent of Skate. Probably one of the most underrated animes to come out from Bone Studios that I would highly recommend checking out. So the first season, to wrap it up in a nutshell, pretty much sees that Sakura is now has a new home and sets this big grandiose stage of what's to come with like another big pivotal fight with a character that comes into like a helper flight mode. Like, hey, I need you to rescue my friend. He's in trouble and he's going through a really bad gang at the moment. We need to save him, and that's what happens in season two. In season two, we see that it immediately thrusts us into that event that happened in the first season and immediately takes us to the nuts to butts fighting and choreography that's spearheaded by Sakura and also by Ren Kaji, who comes in the mix. And I believe, yeah. So in these first four episodes of the second season, it sets the stage for like some really hype, amazing nuts to butts fighting with no punches holding back, and we see characters and interesting villains come about. But the villains in the first four episodes does kind of run its course to the ground super fast, given that it is just showing us like a really flashy fighting and characters that you saw from the first season, but now just having like a little bit of like a huge improvement as a result. Again, in these first four episodes, we see how Sakura still struggling to come in terms of like trying to be like the kind leader that he's supposed to be and be like the example to all. You have characters like Hayato Suo who still struts his stuff and still is like fucking going badass, not killing, not just like bloody his enemies, but like he just like hits them and pins them down in the most beautiful and elegant way possible. And even like characters that I hated in the first season, like Nira, for example, actually surprisingly makes a really good comeback as a character, and I actually would have now rooted for him as a result. Like, hey, he's actually getting better. He wants to be much more better and more useful, and I actually like that in the second season. Now, with that being said, the second season of the show is definitely different from the first season, in which the second season really dives deeper into Sakura's backstory. And after the pivotal critical fight that happened, we see that's well, we get a lot more depth and character interaction to like how Sakura's lifestyle is living and what he's going through after the events of the first four episodes of that second season. And then within the second half of season two, it then dives into like a different story, a different area of, I guess you would call it technically Windbreaker's like red light district arc, you could say, where they then follow up with a one of the Buffurin sisters, which is like one of the big elites essentially, and we follow a character named Subakino, who, make no mistake by what you're seeing on your screen right now, this person is not a girl. This is a guy dressed as a girl, and in the earlier, in the later half of the episodes from 7 through 9, I believe, we get a really good background to like why Subakino dresses the way he does. What is his motivation to becoming stronger? What got him to Bufurin in the first place? And it's really sweet. It's really wholesome. I feel like this is a story that a lot of people will 100% relate to. And in terms of like the character that you really want to go for, I'm also going to say this. Subakino's character is probably my favorite character that I got to know since watching Windbreakers in general. And throughout this little arc here, the whole thing devolves to where now, after the interaction with Subakino, there's a girl that's in distress, and basically it's up to Sakura, Nire, and Suo and company to protect the girl and make sure that she's not falling victim to one of the new enemies that comes beforehand. And the show still like brings out a lot of like amazing fight sequences, a lot of character development, and a lot of like depth within these characters. The ones that you like are gonna have character depth. The ones that are basically villains have character depth. But I think that what makes the show super special, and I thought was gonna be like a pretty big slam dunk of like a second season, completely gets ruined on the 11th episode. So this is where I run into a few of the problems of what Windbreakers season two, and to an extent the first season has, is that it is still holding itself back. Like, don't get me wrong, the fighting in the show is really great. The animation by Cloverworks is amazing. The music is also freaking good. But I feel like the show is still holding itself back. Like it's still holding its punches when it's trying to showcase like what the show has to offer. And it sucks because again, Windbreakers season one I thought had like the much stronger, higher fight sequences and character development that I saw up until that point that showed a lot of potential and a lot of what's to come. The second season, I feel like we're still holding back a lot of the characters. Again, don't get me wrong. As I mentioned already, we have some really good character development and really good new people to really get used to, like Tsubaki, and getting to know Sakura a lot more deeper, and seeing Nira finally being useful and starting to act up for himself. But it sucks that it just feels like it's holding itself back in a way that it's not setting itself apart. Because the thing is, when you compare shows like Tokyo Revengers, for example, that it's clearly an obvious odd to at this point in terms of where it's trying to lean to. Tokyo Revengers came out of the gate swinging. Like at first, admittedly, when the first season of Tokyo Revengers came out, the first two, three episodes were like, okay, it's not really good. But episode four picked up and it gained momentum every single episode to the point that like all the way through to the final 24th episode of Tokyo Revengers, I was hooked. I liked it. And the story made a lot of sense. It didn't falter, it didn't waver whatsoever. Yes, you can argue the later seasons does waver a little bit in comparison, but Tokyo Revengers actually was building momentum and it kept the momentum going up until the very end. And it's not a good show now, but you have to understand that. Windbreaker season two, it's like we had this momentum built. It was starting off really good, really strong, and then episode 11 comes on and it just crushes that momentum instantly. And the way they do it, and this is something that I've I even noticed in the first season is that I hate how they take it where at the beginning of the episode they take you to the point where like, oh, they just beat the bad guys, they're chilling, they're eating food, and they're reflecting, and then it just transitions back to like the real story of like what happened. I hate that. That to me was just a horrible, horrible decision. It just destroys the momentum of what the show could have been. And in the final two episodes, more specifically, it does set the stages for like this big, inevitable villain that I feel like is going to be a pivotal role in the third season of Windbreakers, and that's Yamato Endo. And I'm not going to lie when I say this, the last two episodes with his character design, it does stand out so good. This is definitely the best character design of the show, and he has a pretty interesting background if you pretty much have caught up with Windbreakers up to that point that I actually am super, super fascinated by. But once again, I just wish they didn't kill this guy's momentum. Like it set the momentum up so well, and then they kind of just ruined it by just like okay, nope, we're gonna take a break here, and then we're back at it. Like what the heck? Like I just didn't get that. That decision to me was just not good. I think it was just a horrible decision because if they just kept the momentum going, this could have been like a slam dunk second season in a nutshell. And that's the thing is that even though this show has a lot of amazing highlights, a lot of great qualities of what could be what makes a really good fighting anime, I feel like it's still holding itself back from being like super super good. And again, there are a lot of style fights, there are a lot of style character driven drama moments in this show that I could pick left and right from season two. But the sad thing is that the momentum is what crushed it. It crushed the momentum within not just the 11th episode, but within the midway point of season two. It just crushed the momentum and the hype that I was hoping to get from this show. So overall, Windbreaker season two, it's definitely not terrible as I would hope for. I'm more or less disappointed that we it didn't push itself further. That's the thing I'm left with this show is that it didn't push itself further. It felt like it was still in the first season, and that was it. This felt like what would happen if this was honestly this will be one of the rare instances I'll say this. I think Windbreaker Season 2 should just be called Windbreaker Season 1 Part 2 because that's what it felt like. It felt like this wasn't truly a Season 2 and more like it just was a second half to the first season in a nutshell. So, yeah, sadly disappointed with the show, but it's actually still watchable. It's still one of the better shows to come out of the spring season, admittedly. But for me, it's just not. It's not pushing itself out there. And if the show continues to air as we speak with future seasons, that season three needs to slap harder because the second season has a lot of great things going for it, but it's not pushing itself. So, with that being said, I'm feeling a light to decent seven on this thing. It could be an eight, like I said, but unless it was able to push itself to where I'm like, oh my god, this is memorable, this is iconic, this is gonna be like people talking about this anime of the year kind of stuff, I can't give this thing an 8 out of 10. It's just it's not gonna make it there. So because of that, I would have to give it like a seven as a result. So yeah, just want to talk about Windbreaker season two, get the review out of the way because um, I think that at this point there's not a whole lot that needs to be said about the second season. And yeah, that's really about it. I'll see you on the next one. Later.